A tremendous day for democracy in Washington, D.C. is also a historic day for Georgia. As of around 4:30 today, Democrats Jon Ossoff and Reverend Raphael Warnock will officially be U.S. senators representing Georgia on Capitol Hill. Their historic victories largely overshadowed by the drama and fallout of false claims of election fraud in the presidential race.
The November special election to fill the remainder of Senator Johnny Isakson's term predictably went to a runoff with Warnock as the leading Democrat.
A record number of absentee ballots in the November presidential race were counted into the night and the following days. As the votes were counted, we saw strong Republican leads dwindle until President Biden was projected as the winner of Georgia, and the race between Ossoff and Senator David Perdue was declared a runoff. The campaigns leading up to the runoff election on January 5th were marred by baseless claims of election fraud in Georgia that resulted in multiple failed lawsuits, a hand retally of the nearly 5 million votes in the presidential election, and death threats against election workers in Georgia.
Ossoff and Warnock's historic victories in the runoffs eclipsed by the insurrection at the U.S. Capitol January 6th as Congress met to count the Electoral College votes. Warnock had been projected the winner of his race early that morning, but the announcement that Ossoff had enough votes to win came while the Capitol was under siege by a pro-Trump mob. They're swearing in today, and the shift of power in the Senate would normally be the biggest story in the nation, but it comes the same day as President Biden's inauguration, which received plenty of special attention on its own amid warnings of more potential violence.
The election of Senators Warnock and Ossoff is historic in many ways. Throughout history, there have only been a handful of black U.S. senators from across the entire country. Reverend Warnock, the first black U.S. senator in Georgia's history. Joe Hankey talked to Martin Luther King III about the hope that brings.
Ebenezer Baptist Church behind me is where Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. served as pastor, and those are footsteps that Reverend Raphael Warnock followed in. Now King's son tells me he hopes Warnock can serve as a bridge between the pulpit and Washington. Today, Reverend Raphael Warnock joins a list of only 10 other black U.S. senators throughout history, including notable names such as former President Barack Obama and, as of this afternoon, Vice President Kamala Harris. Warnock is a pastor at Ebenezer Baptist Church, like King, whose civil rights work inspired countless people in the black community. Now, King's son believes Warnock is also serving as an inspiration by being a black senator from Georgia.
It opens doors. He's the first. But it certainly means that other young African-American young men and young women can also aspire to run for the United States Senate.
Warnock even reflected on the inspiration of his election during his election night speech.
With hope, hard work, and the people by our side, anything is possible.
At Ebenezer, Warnock preaches to a predominantly black congregation and, in the model of Dr. King, advocates for equal rights for all. MLK III wants to now see Warnock turn those sermons into legislation.
Not just talk about Medicaid expansion, to be a part of creating legislation that ensures that everyone in the state of Georgia has health care, that ensures that we can begin to create a full employment economy for our state and our nation.
Warnock's place in history is thanks in part to the dedicated work by a list of Georgia organizations who registered new voters and then made sure they voted. King believes it is a successful roadmap for underrepresented communities in other states to find change.
That same apparatus can be created, I believe, in North Carolina and South Carolina and Mississippi and other southern states. And when that is done and voters are touched and understand the importance of coming out to vote, perhaps we will see changes throughout the South.
We are scheduled to speak with Senator Warnock live at 5:30. Of course, he could be put right to work following his swearing in. It's a very big day for the U.S. Senate, faced with approving key Biden cabinet picks and preparing for former President Trump's impeachment trial.
Jon Ossoff is the first Jewish man to represent Georgia in the U.S. Senate. It is a civil rights milestone with deep roots in Georgia. 11 Alive's Doug Richards has more.
Although the civil rights movement in Atlanta originated with the descendants of slaves, Atlanta's Jewish community had its own set of struggles. The two interests had a merger of sorts about a half-century ago. 108 years ago, a Jewish man named Leo Frank was convicted of the murder of a 13-year-old girl named Mary Fagan in downtown Atlanta. White supremacists lynched Frank in Marietta, at a spot now marked with a story of anti-Semitic bigotry. In October 1958, white supremacists bombed the temple on Peachtree Street, Atlanta's foremost Jewish house of worship. The accused bombers escaped conviction. Its rabbi, Jacob Rothschild, had aligned himself with the movement led by Martin Luther King Jr., alarming some in his congregation.
He invited prominent black speakers onto his pulpit. It scared them at the temple. Won't you speaking out like this, Rabbi, attract the ire of the violent white supremacists, and won't they turn on us? And they were right.
The 50 sticks of dynamite that exploded at the temple badly damaged the building but injured nobody. Atlanta's white Christian leaders rallied support, and in turn, Rabbi Rothschild rallied them to support Dr. King. When King won the Nobel Peace Prize in 1964, Rabbi Rothschild organized a multiracial banquet in King's honor, attended by Atlantans and business leaders of all backgrounds. When Dr. King was murdered 4 years later, Rabbi Rothschild delivered a eulogy and cemented an alliance. Over the last year, Raphael Warnock, now the pastor at King's Church, and John Ossoff, a temple attendee, campaigned together. They beat the odds, won the election, and are representing Georgia in the U.S. Senate together.
Doug Richards reporting for us. Senator-elect Ossoff and Senator Warnock are scheduled to be sworn in about 22 minutes at 4:30. The ceremony will be done behind closed doors, followed by a reenactment that we will carry live on air right here on broadcast whenever it may happen. We'll see if it's on time.